So welcome to episode 3 of Hitch APIchat. We're in Barcelona this week. Massive event happening here, Mobile World Congress in 4 years from now. It's where the world comes together to talk about everything mobile, but obviously more and more it's very data driven and thus API driven. So it's an interesting week for us here. Bruno and I have been heading down to 4 years from now. We'll be there more this week, and we'll be speaking to some more people and hopefully have some video around that. This week, like last week, we wanted to go deep on one topic. This week, we want to talk about API documentation. Now, I think what we want to talk about this week is going beyond the basics of API documentation. I think everyone knows you need a basic machine reference in place, so Swagger, OpenAPI, RAML, something like that. But how do you actually engage an audience? So, Bruno, let's start at a high level. What are the movements we're seeing right now in terms of organizations providing more engageable documentation, and what makes documentation more engageable?
Yeah, it's a great question. We're seeing, that it's fine to have the whole API reference. That's like mandatory. Like if you're searching for specific ways of doing whatever you're trying to do with the API, you need to be able to access the whole reference. But what we're seeing more and more is companies getting dedicated to writing documentation for specific use cases. So instead of providing the whole documentation and letting people consume everything, they try to address specific use cases, specific scenarios, and write everything people should do from getting started until getting the full thing working for that specific use case.
Okay. But why are people moving that direction? Why do people mapping directly onto a use case? Is it, well, obviously we have a theory of trying to help people at all different levels, but is it just that driving the use case approach to documentation?
What you see is that APIs are getting more and more productized. So if you think about an API from a product point of view, a company wants to engage with developers and whoever is integrating with their API for specific features. So if they're trying to promote a specific part of their API, it makes sense to write about that specific feature and in that specific use case.
Okay. So it's partially about, I guess, to a degree for the API providers, it's more articulate communication to the market, addressing specific problems and stepping people through those problems, no?
Yeah, I agree with that. So yeah, it's like there's possibly a few common use cases that they think, or the company behind the API thinks that most people will use.
Yeah.
And then you might get a lot of other feedback from the market as well, from external developers, people that are doing ad hoc integrations. So they might as well end up writing their own how-tos and quick start guides.
Okay. And I guess a part of this that we've seen a tiny bit of is obviously the API documentation world has always been very top-down. Of an API provider decides they have a specific feature, they want to articulate how that goes out to market. We're seeing a bit more bottom-up movement. What have you seen around that so far of, I guess, facilitation of the community contributing to that documentation base? Are there some companies who have achieved more in that space so far?
Yeah, I think that whole movement started a while ago with third-party developers building SDKs for startups.
Yeah.
So we're seeing more and more now is that the companies that provide the APIs themselves are also providing the SDKs. But there's a lot of third-party developers that just they build some SDK for whatever API, and they might get some audience around it because the SDK is easy to use. So along with that, let's say movement, you see other people writing specific how-tos about specific use cases for APIs as well. Might just start with something like explaining something you've done yourself.
Okay.
Or might be to reach a wider audience.
Okay. So yeah, this bottom-up approach, or what we're calling the bottom-up approach documentation, is all about anyone being able to contribute. We're actually facilitating that process on the Hitch platform as well, and I think it's a way that people can actually contribute to an API that they work with every day and actually get awareness in their community. and basically build a profile for specific APIs. But yeah, we think this bottom-up approach really is going to make a big change to the documentation space. And I guess it's leading to a different discussion of, rather than API providers having full ownership of communication, it's a bidirectional functionality. So anything else around documentation that you want to cover today?
Just to mention that this movement, we're seeing a lot of movement happening around technical writing, especially in the last few weeks. There's a lot of companies, hiring or getting, busy trying to find technical writers. So if you're a technical writer,
it's a good time.
This is a good time to be you. So yes, we're seeing that a lot, and we're seeing that specifically for this type of documentation. So not so much for, let's call it, the old boring, full API documentation, but more for documentation, targeted at specific use cases.
Okay. So I think one example is Box API. I think they announced a whole range of things recently. Rather than a giant one PDF of 29 pages, it's now very specific actionable activities. And I think they're doing quite well on that bottom-up approach of they've really facilitated their community to contribute more to how to work with their API. But that's all we wanted to cover today. We'd love to hear your thoughts around definitely the bottom-up approach of documentation in this space. We also want to connect more and more with technical writers and how you see this world. So if you want to have a chat, we'd be delighted to discuss with you and maybe share a video with you involved. So thank you for your time. If you're in Barcelona this week, we'd love to catch up. Otherwise, we'll catch you next week. Thank you.